Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I want to talk about some potential first-time All-Stars in the NBA for this upcoming season. But I don't want to just go through a list and talk about some potential young breakout players because that's just a little bit boring, and a lot of different people do that. In this video, I more so want to talk about the context of why there could be a few first-time All-Stars this season just because of a few situations around the league. Now, last year was actually a really good season for first-time All-Stars as well because we had 5 different guys make the team for the first time in their careers, 4 of them in the Eastern Conference being D'Angelo Russell, Ben Simmons, Nikola Vucevic, and Chris Middleton, and then in the Western Conference, we had Nikola Jokic. But this season, we could actually see even more guys make the team for the first time for a couple of different reasons. So let's start in the Western Conference. And as you look at the team from last year, there are 2 spots in 2019 that should be opened up in 2020 simply because of injury. Klay Thompson is not going to play until after the All-Star break this season, more than likely. And then Kevin Durant is not only hurt, but is also in the Eastern Conference with the Nets now. So on paper, it seems like that would probably open up the possibility of some first-time All-Stars potentially sliding into those spots. However, there were also 2 All-Stars from the Eastern Conference last year that moved over to the West, being Kawhi Leonard and D'Angelo Russell. So it seems like those 2 guys would fill that void, and although I think that Kawhi is obviously going to step right in to Kevin Durant's spot and likely be an All-Star starter, I'm not convinced that D'Angelo Russell's transition to Golden State is going to be smooth enough to just guarantee him that other All-Star selection, which opens up that spot. And then when you go down the roster a little bit further, you could certainly see someone like LaMarcus Aldridge as a bit of a fringe selection that could open up another spot for another player, potentially a first-time player. Now, in terms of Aldridge's spot specifically, you also have to think about the fact that Kristaps Porzingis should be back and healthy this year, and if he is healthy, he's certainly an All-Star caliber player. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but the point is, let's just talk about some first-time guys that could fill the voids that I'm talking about of these 1 to 2 spots open in the Western Conference specifically. First up are 2 big guys that are probably still a year away from making this team at least, but are still interesting cases to potentially slide into Aldridge's spot if Porzingis doesn't end up recovering well and someone like Rudy Gobert doesn't slide in that spot. The first is Jaren Jackson Jr. as a great 2-way player, someone that should put up good numbers this season. We'll have Ja Morant there to set him up. He's going to be a good shooter at the big man spot, and it's just so versatile. And assuming Memphis plays pretty well and actually wins a good amount of games, the whole young rising player momentum thing could bring him an All-Star selection. And then similarly, you can look at DeAndre Ayton for the Phoenix Suns as well. If they play well, if he puts up big numbers, which he probably will, he could garner some attention as well. Now, having said that, someone like Rudy Gobert, Kristaps Porzingis is certainly more likely, in my opinion, to take that All-Star spot from LaMarcus Aldridge. But if we're looking specifically at first-time guys, I wouldn't be shocked you could talk me into potentially Jaren Jackson Jr. or DeAndre Ayton for that front court spot in replacement of LaMarcus Aldridge, which brings us to the guard spot that Klay Thompson will be vacating. And this is a really interesting debate. And I actually put out a poll for this yesterday and left out one guy that I should have put in the poll as well. And you guys think that it's going to be Luka Doncic that's going to take this backcourt spot in place of Klay Thompson amongst all these other names that I'm about to talk about. So speaking of Luka, in my opinion, he's more likely to take the backcourt All-Star spot in the West than D'Angelo Russell, simply because he's going to have a bigger role. He was on the team last year. He's not going to have to transition to a new environment the way that D'Lo is, and he's just simply really, really good. He's going to put up great numbers. He's going to be someone that a lot of people are going to pay attention to. He's going to get a lot of votes from fans. So when you're comparing Luka's candidacy to that of D'Angelo Russell's, I would put Luka ahead. However, my pick out of this group to slide into this All-Star backcourt spot would be Donovan Mitchell, and it's for a couple of different reasons. One, I think his efficiency is going to increase this year with Mike Conley alongside him, allowing him to be an on and off ball player, someone that can be off the ball and be a scorer. And then when he wants to, or when the team needs him to, he can play on the ball, but it's not a necessity anymore like it was at times last year because Mike Conley will be there. Also, he's going to put up great numbers. He's going to be a really good points per game, assists per game guy, going to get a lot of attention. But the one thing that I think is going to push him over the top over Luka, because I think it's going to be very close, is just team success. I think the Jazz are going to be better and significantly better than the Mavericks this season. I'm not counting on the Mavs making the playoffs this year in the West. Meanwhile, the Jazz could legitimately be a top 4, maybe even a top 3 team in the Western Conference and a true contender, depending on how their season goes and some of the moves that they make. And that amount of team success is kind of a tiebreaker in my mind. It's not really where I start when I'm picking all-stars. You got to pick guys that are worthy first. But if you have two guys that are so close or going to be so close, in my opinion, between Luka and Donovan Mitchell, I would put Mitchell over the top simply because of the team success. Speaking of team success, a guy that's probably going to be an issue for this season in terms of all-star candidacy is Devin Booker. He's going to put up monster stats, but if that was enough for him to make the all-star team, then he would have made one at some point in the last couple of years to this point in his career. He's always been a really good stats guy, but the Suns themselves have not been very good as a team, and with as stacked as the West has been players-wise, he just hasn't been rewarded with an all-star selection to this point. I definitely think he will be a contender for that, and if the Suns can be better, then it's definitely something that's a possibility. But if I'm ranking those three guys, or those four guys, excuse me, I would go Mitchell, Luka, D'Lo, and then Booker down to the bottom, which brings me to a guy that I should have put in the poll, and I just completely blanked and didn't put him in there, and you guys thankfully reminded me on Twitter, and that's De'Aaron Fox. And I think he is a legit all-star candidate. I would put him right alongside Luka, in my opinion, as someone to potentially be a first-time all-star this year in replacement of Klay Thompson. I think the Kings are going to be good. I think they're going to be better than the Mavs. I'm not 100% convinced that they're going to make the playoffs just because the West is so deep and so good. But he's going to be the engine of that team. He's going to be what drives them. He's going to put up great stats, and I would not be shocked if De'Aaron Fox makes an all-star team this year. You guys can let me know down in the comment section below, out of those five players being D'Lo and Luka and Donovan Mitchell, and who else do we have? Devin Booker and De'Aaron Fox. You guys can let me know who you think if you didn't get a chance to vote in the poll on Twitter yesterday. Okay, that's enough about the Western Conference. Now let's move over to the context of the all-star teams in the East. And as I talked about earlier, two guys that made the team last year in the Eastern Conference, Kawhi Leonard and D'Angelo Russell, are now playing in the West. But it's not just that. There are a few players that, in my opinion, for a variety of circumstances, made the team last year, but should be considered fringe contenders for all-star teams this season. Guys like Nikola Vucevic, Chris Middleton, Kyle Lowry, I wouldn't be shocked to see some regression from them statistically and team success-wise this season, and that could potentially bring them off the all-star team. And then you've got someone like Victor Oladipo that's going to be recovering from an injury. You never really know how he's going to come back from that. He could be missing a ton of games early in the season, and that could hold him back from making an all-star team. And I just wouldn't be shocked. I'm not necessarily projecting that those guys are going to miss it, but that could open up some spots for some first-time guys. Now, certainly players like Jimmy Butler and Andre Drummond that have been there before, that have been all-stars before, could potentially move into those slots if any of those guys slid out. But it's just interesting how many spots could potentially be available in the Eastern Conference on all-star teams. And it could be up to 6, in my opinion, when you account for the 4 fringe guys that I just talked about, and then D'Angelo Russell and Kawhi Leonard switching conferences. And so really you could talk me into any of the guys that I'm about to list as potential first-time all-stars this season simply because of the circumstances of the Eastern Conference all-star teams this coming season. Someone like Miles Turner could have a monster year with or without Victor Oladipo, depending on how that goes. They could be relying on him more because Oladipo will be out, put up bigger numbers. He's always been a really good defensive player, someone that's going to be a really good two-way player. Wouldn't be shocked there, but even if Oladipo is playing, he could raise his game to a new level. Wouldn't be shocked there whatsoever if Miles Turner ended up putting up like 2.5 blocks a game and 17 to 18 points per game and becoming an all-star this season. And in Atlanta, guys like Trae Young and John Collins could put up some big numbers. Even though their team might not be great, there is the possibility that they could maybe be like a 35 to 40 win team this season, but more than likely they're still going to be quote-unquote tanking for another year. But those two guys specifically could still put up monster numbers and certainly convince a few people that they are worthy of all-star selections. You could definitely talk me into that. Same thing in Chicago. I'm not convinced that they're going to be a playoff team this year, but a guy like Zach LaVine or Lauri Markkanen could put up huge numbers on a okay team in the Eastern Conference and certainly put themselves into contention for an all-star selection because of all the other things that are happening with last year's team. In terms of guys with better team success, I wouldn't be shocked if other players from Philadelphia made the team. For example, Tobias Harris, Josh Richardson, depending on how well they play statistically as well as how well Philadelphia plays. Like if they're on like a 60-win pace at the All-Star break, I wouldn't be shocked to see them go into the All-Star weekend with 3 All-Stars, being Ben Simmons, Embiid, and then one of those two guys, specifically because they'll be contributing on both ends of the floor, most notably Josh Richardson being a good defender and a good offensive player, but just being a complementary option to those guys. Wouldn't be surprised. Al Horford could certainly be an option, certainly not in the first-time All-Star category, but in terms of Philadelphia having 3 or maybe even 4 All-Stars at the break, depending on how well they're playing, wouldn't be shocked at all there simply because of the team's success. And then you got a couple of guys that could take a big leap, like Jason Tatum or Pascal Siakam. Tatum's going to have more offensive responsibility. No Kyrie Irving. They're going to be leaning on him with his Team USA teammates like Marcus Smart and Kemba Walker and Jaylen Brown. Would not be surprised at all if Tatum bumps his scoring averages up. People already like Tatum as it is. Wouldn't be surprised to see him get a ton of votes and potentially make his first All-Star team because of a big leap, and the Celtics potentially winning between 50 and 53 games. And then Siakam, I don't really know what to make out of the Raptors at the moment, just because we don't really know how good they're going to be without Kawhi and things like that. They're not going to be championship contenders, but they still could be a good team. But I wouldn't be surprised that if he was the Raptors' only All-Star this year instead of Kyle Lowry, because of his two-way impact, because of his most improved player accolade from last year, because of his statistics continuing to improve as a three-point shooter, just the versatility that he provides on both ends. Would not be surprised at all. You could talk me into any of the guys that I just talked about being first-time All-Stars in the Eastern Conference next season, and I wouldn't be shocked at all because, like I said, there are going to be spots available. In my mind, up to 6 spots from last year's All-Star team in the Eastern Conference could potentially be up for grabs because of 2 guys leaving and 4 other guys that might fall off. Like I said, maybe Jimmy Butler or Andre Drummond slides in and takes a couple of those spots away from that 6 number that I'm talking about, but it's very, very likely, in my opinion, that on either side of the league, we could see a couple of different first-time All-Stars like we did last year, but this list is certainly a bit more on the younger side than some of the guys we saw last year that were kind of in their prime or right in the middle of when they were going to be really good, like Vucevic and Chris Middleton and things like that. But yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video. Like I said, I wanted to go through and talk about some young players that could potentially be first-time All-Stars this year, but I didn't want to just go through a list and be like, this guy could be good, this guy could be good. You guys already know that Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker and Luka Doncic and those guys are good players and are worthy of All-Star selections depending on the circumstances. I just wanted to talk more specifically about the circumstances that could allow them to make the teams rather than just saying, hey, these guys are really good. You guys already know that. But that is going to be the end of today's video. Like I said, once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.